Well, thanks a lot for having me here today. I really like to be involved with this sort of level of discussion. I think it's great to be kind of shaping policy instead of just actually doing river restoration. So, my name is Marty Melchior. I'm the regional director for Interfluve. Interfluve is a river restoration design consulting engineering firm. Interfluve is a little bit of a freak of nature. We have, for about 20 years of our existence, we're the only game in the U.S. really. And so we have a unique perspective over some 1,500 river restoration projects across the country. I myself have been practicing river restoration for 20 years. I've done probably about 200 river restoration projects in that time, at kind of a furious and exhausting pace sometimes. But what I want to do today is talk about river restoration, why we do it. I'm going to show you a bunch of examples of stuff from around the country. I went and polled a lot of the friends I have in other states, asked them what works and what doesn't in their state programs, and try to bring those lessons to you guys. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about prioritization and implementation. So, why do we do river restoration? When considering an organized program, I think it helps to first ask the big questions. And for states, it boils down to this question: why should anyone pay for river restoration? What good does it do us? It's important then to first ask what's wrong with our rivers that we should need to consider fixing them. And I think we've gone over a lot of that today. I won't belabor that. We have severely impacted about a third of our rivers to the point where they're listed on the 303D list. But how have we done so, and why fix them? So, in the past we've tended to take the rivers for granted as simply a conduit for stormwater. We have been managing our water since prehistoric times. If you look at aerials of England, you can see old ditch lines from thousands of years ago. Sometimes we want to get rid of the water, sometimes we want to keep it on the land. Each of those actions has a negative consequence for the river and the life that's in that river. Those actions result, the ones I have listed here, they all result in a loss of functional functions in the river, which some of the folks talked about earlier. Generally, we can't get those back unless we push the river back toward some target trajectory. All of the actions listed here result in a simplification or elimination of habitats, poor water quality, altered flood regimes, altered groundwater flow, and river instability. Again, a lot of folks talk about the bad things that can happen in rivers. So, it's then also important to ask, when our rivers are degraded, what's lost in terms of the economic value? If you just look at the value of the Delaware estuary watershed by itself, for instance, you're talking almost $14 billion of estimated value. It's beneficial to have clean water for swimming and fishing and recreating. It is, of course, not beneficial to anybody that has soil erosion, nutrient loss, etc. Nate and others showed some numbers for Iowa. Look at Wisconsin. Tourism is the third largest industry in Wisconsin, $13 billion a year. Most of that is centered around lakes and rivers. Wisconsin has the second highest number of out-of-state angler days except Florida. So why are they coming to Wisconsin? They're coming because there are clean water opportunities there. When we lose soil, we lose money. When we lose nutrients, we lose money as well. And those have to be put back. Streams and restoring streams can decrease flooding as well. Nobody benefits from increased flooding, and that problem is only getting worse. Healthy headwater, riparian, wetlands, forests, and prairies can absorb more water, slow that water down, and thus increase flooding. So there's value there. When you remove a dam, for instance, we've seen that land values increase. People like to live near healthy rivers. They don't like to live near unhealthy ones. This yellow line on the outside represents the former impoundment, so everything inside that was inundated. This is West Bend, Wisconsin. Typical small dam removal in the Midwest. That town did some prairie restoration there. There's a baseball field, Riverside Park. People go there to take pictures of wedding day, stuff like that. And land values have improved. University of Wisconsin, together with the River Alliance of Wisconsin, did a study of a bunch, I think 14 former impoundments in Wisconsin, and found that land values increased in every one of those cases. River restoration creates jobs as well. This has become a big issue with a lot of our projects as part of the Recovery Act legislation. We've had to keep a closer track on that. Massachusetts DER, the Department of Ecological Restoration, has examined job creation data for some of the recent dam removals and found that jobs, mainly construction, some engineering jobs like mine, and then material suppliers for those projects also outpace both Massachusetts road construction job and federal military spending related jobs at about 12.5 full-time jobs for $1 million invested. If you look at Oregon, the University of Oregon did a similar study and found that their estimates show between 19 and 24 jobs created per $1 million in public investment. Compare that to 5 to 7 jobs per million for investment in coal, oil, and natural gas. NOAA found even higher numbers for estuary and river restoration, dam removal in coastal areas, as high as 32 jobs per $1 million spent. We built our rivers our cities on rivers, largely because of barge traffic and commerce. And then those industries kind of waned, and a lot of those areas really started to get dilapidated, run down. But now a lot of cities have turned their attention back toward the river again, here in Iowa too. Milwaukee, for instance, the city of Racine went from 90 days of closed beaches down to just 4 days in 5 years after a lot of stormwater work and river restoration work. So we're turning our attention toward rivers. People are starting to pay closer attention to them, and they want them to be healthy. They depend on water and rivers for growing crops and drinking water, etc. A critical part of our lives. I would go so far as to say that the future of life on Earth is really dependent on the health of our natural systems, rivers being one of those. We've been making rational economic decisions about land management for a long time. Those rational economic decisions, until recently, did not consider the negative impacts of our natural systems. But that's changing now. And I'm glad to see that. The rivers have been taking a hit for a long time, and we're starting to see the effects of that course of action. Increased runoff, increased erosion instability, sediment pollution, habitat degradation, water quality degradation. So that stands to reason then if we do the opposite, or we start to include environmental and natural systems in our economic decisions, then we can probably reverse some of those effects. Do we need to do that? Why can't we just let the rivers recover on their own? Well, we can do that, and they will reach an equilibrium at some point if you were to shut off the stressors or stop doing any additional stress. But that could take hundreds or even thousands of years. And we don't live that long, and we're impatient people. So if we want to see the benefits, we have to push these systems, like I said. Business as usual will only result in further degradation. Here's a couple of examples. Whittlesey Creek on the left was logged, and splash dams were built to push the logs down to the lake, bulldoze that system. The trees are not old enough yet in that system to fall in and start creating some complexity in the river. That river has remained and will remain pretty much devoid of any complex habitat for another 100 years, unless something is done about it. George Washington surveyed this ditch in the Great Visible Swamp. It has remained relatively unchanged in that time without much human intervention at all. So it's a hard question to answer why we restore rivers. I think one way to look at it is to look at what we've lost. They offer a mirror into our management of the land, air, and water. So we can look at a river and say, well, if it's not healthy, then clearly we've been doing something in the landscape that is affecting it. And so it's a canary in the coal mine, if you will, a reflection of our behavior upland. Where do we practice river restoration? Well, a study was done by a bunch of different universities where they looked at 37,000 river restoration projects across the country. This is back in 2004. And at that time, 88% of river restoration projects were done in the Pacific Northwest and Chesapeake Bay. That's a lot. Since then, it's changed a little bit. There are active stream mitigation programs in the Carolinas, Tennessee, Kentucky, and so they've bumped up their density a lot in the last 10 years. Northern California is doing a lot more too. But for the most part, the shades on here probably wouldn't change much if you were to repeat this poll. So how do we do river restoration? I'm going to talk about some examples. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each one. I just want to run you through some of the things that we do in other states. This is sort of from my Rose Gallery. I have a whole PowerPoint presentation about 50 slides long with pictures of using streams. This is just one slide. We used to just make those economic decisions again without any consideration for the natural world. This is what you get. Rivers were seen as simply a conduit for floodwater, and that's it. But that's changing, thankfully. What's the simplest thing you can do? Well, here's an example of Plymouth, Massachusetts, right next to Plymouth Rock. People were trampling the banks. There was bank erosion there. And they wanted to transition from the river to this nice manicured park that they have at Birch Park. So we just did some bank stabilization and native vegetation. And it's become really a centerpiece for the town. If you shut off stressors, like in this case in Montana, get the cows out of the stream, you can go back in there and dig pools and construct riffles, build sediment bars and things like that, create in-stream habitat complexity. That's a very simple project as well. This is a little more complicated, but this is a headwater restoration where we were actually bulldozing and recreating a whole valley. So this was all a retired aquaculture facility, a bunch of ponds. Used to be a trout stream a long time ago. So we went in there and just rebuilt the valley floor and then built the streams on top of that. And within just a couple of years, in fact, we had trout in there within 30 minutes of construction. This is what it looked like just after 30 years. I'll bring up the point later of working from the headwaters down. Another simple project is bank stabilization. Simple toe protection. We talked a little bit about toe protection here. There's actually a stone toe here with some wood in it, and then just graded upper slopes. This was done in '98, and it looks pretty much the same today. You can do a lot more things with bioengineering than I just showed you, but kind of on the other end of the bioengineering spectrum, a little more complicated is this project here, which is a bunch of stacked plastic honeycomb structures that you can fill with soil and then plant into it. And this was done, these are done where you don't want the stream to move at all over the long term. This is in Portland. Done to protect the infrastructure. Here's a dual purpose bank stabilization treatment. This is using logs, log jam basically treatment, kind of a Western style log jam here on the Sandy Stream in Ashland, Wisconsin. It has a dual purpose of stabilizing the bank and protecting this farmer's road, but also creating habitat at the same time. And you can see it's really come alive there in the picture, and it just gets stronger over time. You can do things like using coarse woody debris, small wood, bundled up and buried in the bank toe to protect the toe of the bank. Here's another example of that. And this one actually has some encapsulated soil, which I'll talk about in a second. When you want to build a bank out of nothing, when you don't have a bank, we have to, you can't just pack dirt on there and put fabric over it or seed. It will just blow away the next time the big flood comes down. So you have to encapsulate the soil sometimes and give it some structure. Here we're using coconut fiber-based material that lasts 3 to 5 years and then degrades and goes away once the vegetation is taken over and the roots have stabilized the soil. Sometimes you need to move the stream. This is a DOT-related channel relocation project. The stream was where they wanted the road to go, and so we moved the road, moved the stream over so that they could accommodate the new highway. In this case, the stream that was there was a ditch, and so the stream that was built is much better than what was there before. That was impacted. That's another example of just a stream that was moved to accommodate the road. We talked a little about remeandering. We do a lot of that in different places. This is another Massachusetts project. On the left, you can see a lot of busy people there doing a lot of different things, but if you look at that picture on the left, you can see there's some pools created there. There's riffles just waiting to turn the water on, really. Excavating a floodplain, that's what that excavator is doing right now. And those guys are putting seed down and getting ready to place fabric as well. There's also some wood in there for habitat. And the processes in that case was fairly simple: digging a rough cut channel, placing some wood, and then building the riffles and pools around there. There's more to it than that, obviously, but I don't have a lot of time to get into the details. And this is what it looked like just after 9 months or so. Urban channels. So sometimes, like in this previous example, you can build a stream and it's allowed to migrate back and forth. That's what channels do. We shouldn't get the wrong impression that erosion is a bad thing. Sometimes bank erosion is okay as long as it occurs at a normal rate. But in urban areas where we have infrastructure at risk, we can't allow that. We have to set limits on it, or we have to just lock that stream in place. The traditional way of doing that was to put it in concrete or riprap or things like that. We can do better than that, though. There are intermediate steps in between there. LA just had a conference on concrete removal, and who did they invite to come there but people from Milwaukee to give talks about what they did in Milwaukee. So the stream on the right is not mobile, or it can't move. It's locked in place at the toe. It's got some bioengineering on top. It's maintainable. They can mow it, but it's a far cry better from the one on the left. It's got some pools and riffles in it at least. Here's another example of this. Is a 2-stage channel where you've got a low flow channel that's built inside of a larger flood control channel, storage channel. Another Milwaukee example. We talked about downcutting or incision. When a waterfall forms in the creek, that head cuts or rips its way upstream. Niagara Falls is a good example of a head cut that was moving upstream at about a foot per year. So they put concrete on the face of it and stop it from moving. But once that happens, you have an incised channel. The way to fix that can be to raise the channel bed up, which we did here in Tepee Creek in Seattle. Raise that channel bed up, and now the stream has access to the floodplain again and can dissipate its energy out over a much wider area. This is an example from my hometown, Shakopee, Minnesota, where we had a 12-foot deep ditch. It used to be a tiny little stream when the landowner was a kid. 50 years later, it's 12 feet deep and about 10 times as wide. So to fix that, we raised the channel up and constructed a little bit of a floodplain there to help, again, dissipate that energy. This one also includes filling of the channel with a porous material. It's called regenerative stonewater conveyance, where you can actually get infiltration and storage of base flow kind of an underground storage, groundwater storage device. You can use grade control to prevent incision from happening. This is a pipe protection project in Milwaukee. There's a pipe under that riffle. Looks like a nice natural riffle, but it's actually a infrastructure protection. In this case, in Alaska, there's a large restoration project upstream where someone's concerned about incision moving its way upstream. So we built a grade control structure at the bottom end and throughout to create some habitat, but also prevent further incision upstream. Floodplain lowering here, the guys are standing on floodplain that has been lowered about 4 feet. Sometimes when you have it inside a channel, you can't raise the channel bed up because that will cause further flooding. So the alternative then is to lower the floodplain down, which you can also do. And you get extra storage out of it as well. Here's an urban wetland stream reclamation project on Methodist Hospital property in St. Louis Park, Minnesota. Minnehaha Creek was ditched many years ago, and this is just a meandering stream now with some wood in there. And it was constructed in 2009. Here's a wetland channel reclamation. This is the Eel River in Massachusetts. This was about 8,000 feet of wetland stream channel restoration and 40 acres of cranberry bog restoration. Again, headwater stream, starting at the headwaters and working our way up. You can do a lot with golf courses. They oftentimes have creeks running through them. They're built in floodplains a lot of times, flat areas. And so you can work with those guys on getting the streams offline, making them an amenity or maybe a challenge instead of an obstacle or a conduit just for water. Fish passage. So people build dams and we need to get fish over those. One way to do that is to build a channel around the dam. This is a case of a bypass channel on the river around an irrigation dam. So we're basically building a stream where there wasn't one. There are riffles in there, there's pools, there's wood in there for salmon habitat. And so the coho salmon can get around the dam. Rock ramps, we've seen a couple examples of that. There's the Charles City people are going to talk later, so I won't belabor that one. Fish passage sometimes is just a matter of removing problem culverts. This one here is a perch culvert. It was also a problem with wood piling up around it and blowing the culvert out periodically. So we just ripped that out and replaced it with a bottomless arch culvert. It's got a natural bottom. The stream just goes right through there. So no problem passing wood and no problem passing trout. Dam removal, of course, is by far the best bang for your buck in terms of the miles of river restored with the money that you're spending. This is the Hemlock Dam in central Washington. Moderately sized dam removed. You can see in the picture on the right, we've got wood on the right side of the photo there stabilizing the bank. There's a point bar, a constructed gravel bar there. There's riffles, pools. There's a bunch of poles sticking up on the left side of the picture. That's actually floodplain wood that's put there to mimic the complexity of an old growth or a second growth forest so that when it does flood, it traps debris and prevents avulsion from occurring. Avulsion is when the stream jumps across and grabs another path. We don't want it to do that, so we give it the path of least resistance by building a channel and making it go that way. Bluff erosion is a big problem. Minnesota River studies have shown that as much as 15% of the sediment load in the Minnesota River, it comes from bluffs. Another 12% from ravines and gullies. One way of fixing bluff erosion is to just stabilize the toe and let the upper slope stabilize itself. You have a couple pictures of just log jams used to stabilize the toe, pull it out away from the bluff, and then just leave the rest of the bluff alone. It's relatively inexpensive treatment for a pretty tough situation. Gully erosion, again, a big contributor to sediment. You can do a lot of things there. Grade control is one of them, and hydrologic control is the other. I've been involved with some workshops in the Minnesota River Valley. What we decided, the best thing for people to do is to tackle it from both the hydrologic side and the physical side, which holds true for every kind of river restoration project there is. That's my lipstick in a pig slide. I'll show you later. We'll get to that. But, so, can you tell that the stream was built? Most people couldn't. My goal when I'm designing or when I'm on a team designing a stream is that only the people that actually constructed it will know that that stream was not completely natural. There's a high level of proficiency out there with a few people. You guys have all the tools in place, it looks like to me, to have a successful stream restoration program. It's just a matter of getting that all in an organized fashion. How long does it take to do projects? About 2 to 4 years, generally speaking. If you're talking about a moderately sized dam, 3 to 7 years. A big dam, you're talking much longer than that. As you move forward with this plan, if you do, just please make sure that you don't require that projects get done within a year or two. That will kill your restoration because it's impossible to get a project done in a year most of the time. So you got to have some flexibility there. How much do projects cost? Well, how much does a house cost? That's what I always ask people, or tell people when they ask that question. But there's obviously a wide range, right? The bottom line here is that if you look at the past 100 projects, I just delved through our numbers. Our average design contract was $60,000, but was as low as $5,000 and up to $400,000. Our average construction cost, and this is over all of those kinds of projects I showed you, was about $180,000, range from $30,000 up to $5 million. So there's a huge range there, and it depends on so many different factors. If you go back and look at that NRSS database, that 37,000 projects again, 20,000 of those had funding data associated with it. This is just a sampling of the table, but an average of $1 billion spent over 27 states in the last 10 years. So land acquisition, obviously the biggest one, but some of those we talked about: floodplain restoration, 200,000, channel restoration, 120. I wouldn't argue with those except for maybe the dam removal. When this study was done, dam removals were taking the low-hanging fruit, and those were easy. And we're getting rid of a lot of those dams, and the ones that are left are harder, and so they're getting to be more and more expensive. What makes up a successful state river restoration program? I went around and called all my buddies in different states and asked them these questions. So these are sort of a breakdown or a summary of their answers. What leads these projects in other states? Oftentimes, a project manager for projects comes from a local watershed group with assistance from dedicated state staff who then hire pre-qualified experts in design and construction. Remember, this isn't every state. These are just the states that are the top 5. Okay, so Oregon, Washington, Minnesota, well, not Minnesota, Massachusetts, Maryland, and the Carolinas. I did talk to some Midwestern friends too. Our restoration project is done in accordance with the state plan. Oddly enough, rarely. I think it's going to be more of a regular thing, but currently only Oregon, Washington, Maryland, and Massachusetts, from what I can tell, have really organized, unified dedicated river restoration plans, programs. Some states have active, well-organized state programs that are geared towards stream mitigation, those being the Carolinas. That's a different animal. They get a lot of money, but they have some constraints there. And then the rest of us all kind of piecemeal projects or have a general plan but no defined unified plan or dedication part. So you're not alone here. What you're trying to do, there's a lot of people out there trying to do the same thing. What entities, stakeholders need to be involved in the completion of a successful see lots of people involved. It slows the process down. It's obviously more efficient when there's only one person involved, but that never happens, so you never get funded that way. So you need a cooperating landowner, watershed groups, agency folks, a federal agency, and oftentimes municipality. So from these states and from American Rivers, who funds a lot of projects, these are the top 7 things that you need to have. Dedicated restoration staff that have restoration goals. They have a specific number of stream restoration projects that they want to get in the ground. They may not reach that every year, but they at least have the number there. Adequate funding for that program. Adequate funding for the projects, or some of the projects at least. And then watershed group initiation and assistance. This was common to all of them. In fact, it was one of the number one things they all said. Like, you got to have watersheds involved. Technical guidance from the state, then to those watershed groups. Enforceable dam safety laws. Not everybody said this, but this was a big one. States that have changed their laws so that dam owners must inspect their own dams and then either repair or remove those dams based on the inspection results really drives a lot of dam removal and modification. Owners are also then, a lot of owners, frankly, when they're told that, they're like, geez, I didn't know that I owned the dam, or I had no idea that if somebody drowns here, I am personally liable and could be sued. That really changes the playing field, I can tell you. And then you need qualified designers, either internally or externally. Massachusetts, just an example of some of their guidance documents. They do a lot of trainings for nonprofit folks. They have people like me come in and talk to them, and they get assessment from qualified designers. West Coast. So what do they do out west? What's so great about Oregon, Washington, California? Well, they have a 30-year jump on the rest of us because of the Endangered Species Act listing of salmon in 1992, which, Congress orders those states to recover those species. And the timeline was basically biological assessments done in the 70s and 80s. Biological opinions were written in the early 90s. And then the local governments had a timetable then for mitigating those impacts through stormwater and river restoration. Those projects really didn't start ramping up until after 2000, but they've been going steady ever since then. They get some federal funding for projects, but most of the projects are paid by ratepayers, so water, sewer, trash, electricity. And then you have help from people like the Bonneville Power Administration, big energy entities that have an interest in restoring salmon also. That is markedly different from what we do around here. We don't have endangered sportfish. We have endangered mussels, but nobody seems to care much about them. Not enough to give you millions of dollars. We have been doing a lot of fish habitat work, really, for the last 30, 40 years. Mainly structure-based, a lot of bank stabilization, but really just kind of locking channels in place. That's starting to change a little bit. Michigan and Minnesota DNRs are really interested in more geomorphic, fluvial-based channel design, natural channel design, which is good, so we're progressing forward a little bit. The occasional dam removal, but again, funding is extremely poor when you compare it to $300 million a year in North Carolina, or $65 million a year in Maryland, for instance. And look how small Maryland is. So, although there's no defined program for Minnesota and Michigan, and really many other states, at least these states have several full-time staff members devoted to just river restoration. Wisconsin does not. Prioritization procedures then really just they're getting incoming projects from people and they're ranking them based on these criteria here. And away they go. They go and get money then in the Midwest, and this isn't really unique to the Midwest, but you have to scratch and claw for money from a whole bunch of different places. Now they have this LaSAR Council funding, which is nice. There's some state conservation tax money available to you. restoration, dam safety programs, state bond fund, Fish and Wildlife Service, some flood damage reduction funding, and clean water. How do they do it in Maryland? Well, the EPA determines the TMDLs just like they do in every other state. And there, the municipal counties, Baltimore and Annapolis, have developed watershed implementation plans based on those TMDLs, which is also required. But those include specific project objectives as well, and they're really geared toward stream restoration. And so then they get implementation funding from income and property taxes, and then also some federal money in this Chesapeake Coastal Fund, which is $65 million from carbon and gas tax. In the southeast, it's different, but mitigation banks, bankers buy up these land, they buy up land. A lot of these bankers are associated with a design firm, so the design firm will actually buy the land, restore the stream, and then sell the credits. This has become a real commodity market and has driven the cost of restoration design down to where a lot of us don't even want to work there. The restoration is done by a lot of inexperienced folks. They've had a tremendously high degree of failure. Almost 40% of projects have some degree of failure on them out there. So they've got a lot of flack for that. It's coming around, and people are getting more experience and doing things better. But again, they kind of jumped into it on their own and really had no template to go by. So there's a little bit of trial and error. Do other states begin projects with goals for water quality improvement, or is that just an outcome of how projects are done? The short answer is that water quality is almost always a driver. And from everybody I polled, that was really the number one, and I'll show you another slide that deals with that again. And generally speaking, water quality funding far outpaces habitat funding. In Wisconsin, there's about $1 million or $2 million in trout stamp habitat money, and another 14 to 20 million from other sources. So, if you go back to that 37,000 database, the NRRSS database, these are the top 5 drivers, commonly stated goals. Enhance water quality by far number 1. Manage riparian zones, improve in-stream habitat, and then improve fish passage, and then bank stabilization way down at the bottom. But where's most restoration money spent in the Midwest? Down at number 5. How important is recreation and use? I think it's different in Iowa. There seems to be a pretty active kayak community here. We have paddlers in every other state I've worked in, but and everyone I talked to agreed that they are always present but never a loud voice. I think they could be more organized. The watershed groups generally are more organized and louder. Generally speaking, people in favor of restoration and dam removal are pretty quiet and are out yelling by the people that are not in favor of it. I would like to get that changed. So we need to be more obnoxious, I guess, is the lesson there. Here's my lipstick on a pink slide. So you can easily spend restoration dollars in the wrong place and have it do absolutely nothing. You have to combine watershed hydrologic restoration with stream restoration. So it does you absolutely no good to do a bunch of river restoration projects at the bottom of your watershed in the park somewhere. It may have an aesthetic impact. As you've seen, it can be a big attractor for people to that city, but it does nothing for water quality. So if you want to improve water quality, which is again the #1 stated goal, you have to start at the headwaters, combine things like moss cobs, sediment control basins, infiltration basins, things like that, and work with farmers to slow the water coming off the land first. Then you can start working with the river restoration aspects. So, lastly, I want to talk about prioritization. So, just a couple more slides. How do you prioritize projects? Was the question that I was told wanted to be answered. We've seen some of that with some of the assessments here. Whenever you do a river restoration, you assess assess first, and then you design and then you implement. But what if you have a watershed or a state with thousands or hundreds of projects? How do you possibly figure out which one's going to do? I'm going to give you an example of Scott County in Minnesota. They were getting money, 319 money in other monies, and kind of haphazardly throwing that money at bank erosion wherever people just came and signed up for it. So whoever came first got it, but they had doubts about whether that was effective or not in having them reach their TMDL targets. So they hired us to look at the watershed. So we walked the stream, and wherever we saw a project like a ditch that could be re-meandered, or a bank that needed stabilization, or grade control, or something like that, we filled out a form where we ranked those projects based on a bunch of metrics. So the metric is on the left there: infrastructure risk, project complexity. Where is the project? Is it in the headwaters or not? Sediment loading, things like that. Project cost. And we rank those based on this metric system that we devised with our clients over the years. And it's customizable to whatever watershed you're in. And then what you get is, after doing your geomorphic assessment and your projects, you get a huge list of projects. This is just a tiny fraction of the 168 projects that we got out of the Scott County area. And then you can, in Excel, then just rank these projects based on one of these metrics or all of them. So if you're just concerned about cost and wanting to do the lowest cost project, you can rank them all by cost alone. Or you can rank them by all of these to try and figure what the best project is. So here we have this project number 1 just happens to score way better than the other ones. That's the first one they look for. And so what that did for Scott County was, what we found out was that bank erosion was actually accounting for a small amount of the total sediment load. Where the most sediment was coming from was really ravines and bluffs. And so a combined approach was then to divert that money to Wascob implementation in the farm fields, and then bluffs of ravine stabilization in the transitional reach of the stream. So really a huge shift in the way that they spend the money. So the example being, you can use science and geomorphology to spend your money in the right place. And so I'll leave you with this, that I never like the term natural resources because it assumes extraction or just kind of that those resources are there for us to use. We have things like gold or oil and gas, metals. You mine those and they're gone forever. We can recycle them to some degree, but for instance, oil and gas, when we burn that, it's gone. We can't get that back. Here we have a resource that we have used and abused for a long time that we can restore in relatively short order and for actually a small fraction of the money that we spend on some of these other things. You can set the clock back to some degree. So what a great thing. We can create jobs. We can restore extremely valuable resources critical to our survival. And when you ask that person when they got home, what did you do today? Did you build another parking lot? No, I actually built a stream today, and that's a cool thing. So I guess I'll stop there and take any questions if you have them. Thanks again for having me.
Thanks, Marty.
Thank you. I knew I could get flying carpet into this. What about if the dam serves as a barrier to efficiency? You'd have to weigh that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that's been a big issue on the Great Lakes, actually, and with, carp, Asian carp coming up. Generally speaking, if it's an invasive fish, a dam's not going to stop them. They will get up there somehow, probably midnight management, we call it, or some other way they get there.
Well, was it a catastrophic event?
Right, yeah.
They were a river flood.
Yeah, and if they're up there now, they're up there. But on the Great Lakes, it's been a big issue. They are some people want to keep these lower barrier dams that are right at the lake. Other people want to take them out.
I'm talking about that.
Yeah, sure.
Is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about just
Yeah, I know
in
about
general.
that. We have that issue too here.
Right, yeah. So when I started doing river restoration, invasive species consisted of green canary grass. It was about the only one that we had to worry about. And now it's just a ridiculous montage of invasives.
Anything else? Representative Eisenhower.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Iowa had a flood mitigation board a couple weeks ago. We allocated hundreds of $millions for flood mitigation projects. Presumably, many of them include some form of river restoration as part of it. That priority was based on which counties had increasing sales tax revenue going forward that you could use on the projects. I'm not sure if that's the most sensible way to prioritize either, but perhaps you could take a look at some of our projects proposed as part of that and see how well they may be consistent with some of the principles you outlined for us here. My general question is it more costly to invest in river restoration to prevent floods than it is to try to restore rivers in the wake of floods?
Well, boy, that's a tricky question. Because floods come in all sizes, right? And
It gets bigger and more
right, bigger and more frequent, definitely. There was a question earlier about nutrient cycling and how much rivers can absorb in terms of nutrient cycling. This is the same thing here. Rivers and ecological restoration, wetland restoration can help reduce flooding, but only to a certain degree. When you get a 1,000-year event or a 500-year event, then the degree to which river restoration can reduce that flood is actually measurable. We can model that, but it's not going to eliminate floods. It may reduce their impact, and you can measure it. It's not a perfect model. It's not always accurate, but you can do it.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was looking at your slide on the urban channel reclamation, and it shows a typical cement structure, and then the other picture showed this kind of a meandering, more grassy area. When you're in urban environments and you have a huge amount of runoff, isn't it very difficult to keep that other structure from eroding and being blown out, in the development process, or do you keep some of the concrete on the very base and try to spread it out? I mean, a lot of times we also have homes and things that are very close by, and you can't get that setback.
Yeah, that's a great question. You can actually model that and make sure that those things don't happen. When we do river restoration anywhere, there's a level of engineering due diligence that goes into every project. Right? So if you're building a project out in the boondocks in the forest somewhere, on a little tiny trout stream, there's a certain level of engineering expertise that goes into that. When you're in an urban area, that's a whole other ballgame, and the level of due diligence there is much increased. So in the case of those streams where we're removing concrete and replacing it with a quasi-natural channel, we're creating a hydraulic model there, so we're looking at cross-sections throughout that system, modeling the water as it comes down during various floods, and we're actually finding out how much erosive power that stream has in that cross-section and up the banks. And so we can nail down the threshold by which a rock is going to move or not. So you're right, if you build a stream that is made out of 6-inch and smaller cobbles, and that stream is capable of moving 12-inch rock, well, then you're going to be back there again doing something else. So there's no guesswork involved. When at least we do a project, we've got it nailed down so that we know what's going to work and we size those materials properly.
Thank you on that. I noticed that when at the start you talked about the keeping out the banks of rivers, and some some years back, I had an opportunity to attend the National Conference of Legislators in San Antonio and met a woman that was involved with saving the San Antonio River because the economic impact that the city had paid for an economic impact study said that probably the best use was to channelize the river and put it under a huge culvert and use that for parking on the backside of all the buildings on the San Antonio River, because when it's been there, it's a microclimate down below, and all the buildings were facing the other way. And it was through her efforts and school children that they wanted to save that habitat. And she tricked the mayor into being on the bridge when they had their little float down the little San Antonio River, and they had all the signs and TV crews there saying, "Thank you, Mayor, for saving our river." And it was a great story, and it ended up where they just had a little path along the river, and they did some bank enhancements and the kind of things you're talking about. And then they just had a few of these places, they used the back doors, the back side of the buildings. They started doing little, stops and restaurants. And the rest history about what that economic impact was. And I guess what they did to resolve the flood pattern is they had a diversion deal for high water levels. But, an economic impact of rivers is, I think, really key and a motivating factor that we should look at in our state because of, Iowans really do want to be by water, and they want to recreate in it, they want to be near it, they want to walk by it, and I'm glad that you put that in the beginning of your talk about the real value of it, because I consider our rivers and stream as a resource that has been too long neglected, and I think Iowans are really starting to speak out on that, even though the kayakers and canoers might not be as vocal as they are in some states. I assure you they're picking up their volume here in Iowa. So, thank you.
Thanks. Next time you all drive across the river, I want you to punch the top of your roof, and then see how many times you do that in a day, and you'll be surprised.
Any other questions? Otherwise, thank you for